The thing about H.P. Lovecraft is that his stories have become timeless and fit several different layers of horror as a genre. While his influence over anime isn't profound, some of the best IPs have used his themes of hopelessness, existentialism, eldritch horrors, cosmic horror, fear of the unknown, and dark fantasy to produce something that feels like fresh wind. Just, the sort of fresh wind that blows through hell. We're not going to extend this intro too much longer, so in this video, we're going to explore the 12 best Lovecraftian anime with horrors beyond comprehension. And if you feel like we should add something to this list, you know where to let us know. But before we begin, please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Those 2 small clicks will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these marvelous videos in the future. And now, let's begin. Housing Complex C, 2022. In the sleepy seaside town of Kurosaki, a heatwave pushes an oddball named Kimi Shirokado to complain loud and long enough for the senior citizens of Housing Complex C to agree to retrieve an old ice machine from a hidden storage cellar, but they end up discovering more than forgotten appliances. Soon after, Kimi befriends Yuri Koshide, whose family has just moved in, along with a group of Mid-Eastern interns. One of them, Kanchan Mia, saves Kimi when she suddenly and seemingly willfully jumps off the roof without a word. Later, Kimi leads Yuri to the cellar, where they find disturbing artwork that belonged to Hideo, a reclusive tenant. They return his pen, and he gifts them with a sweet sketch in exchange, which is strange because it's not his art style. The next day, Kimi checks in on him, manages to break a figurine, and finds his room overtaken by moss. Hideo is nowhere to be found, and the police write off his disappearance. Kimi tries to smooth things over between the residents and the interns by planning a shaved ice party. Meanwhile, the elders start finding dead fish across the property and begin pointing fingers. One resident posts himself on guard. At the party, Kentaro Yoshii notices something wrong with the syrup. His suspicions take him to a neighbor's apartment where moss creeps along the walls. The syrup turns out to be made with a dog's severed head. Takashi doesn't want the situation to escalate and tries to act as a mediator. He warns that suspicion only leads back to the same place and that watch groups won't solve anything. Even Kanchan gets turned on by his own group, leaving Rubel disgusted. Takashi links the strange events to the lyrics of an old song, but he's stuck until he sees Rubel off and finds the true Kuroro shrine behind the complex. What he finds there breaks the mystery open, but it's not the end of the story just yet. Later, Kimi, Yuri, and Kanchan realize that Takashi is missing. They search the cellar again and find Hideo's drawings torn up. In a black chamber, a mural shows fish people worshipping a mountain god. Kimi goes in alone and returns to Yuri, explaining that the moss is what's left of Takashi. Back in her apartment, Kimi questions the glowing embryo she calls Mother, wondering aloud if the cycle will begin again. Kimi gives Takashi's journal to Kobayashi, who reveals the full story. You see, the fish people worship Kuzululu and offer human sacrifices to Iyo Yoloki Soyohosu, a being that took on Kimi's form and trapped the complex in a time loop stuck in the year 2000. The Koshides, descended from the fish people, work against her. Kobayashi tries to confront Kimi but dies at the hands of Mr. Koshide, who, along with his wife, has nearly killed all of the tenants. In the cellar, Yuri attempts to kill Kimi, but Kimi reveals her identity and calls forth Yuri's parents' mutilated remains. No longer interested in playing human, she kills Yuri and ends the loop. She had given Kanchan a stone earlier, and with no other choice, he abandons his beliefs and chants a protective spell. He wakes up in the present, in the now restored town of Shirosaki. On the rooftop of the ruined complex, a white-haired Kimi watches him leave, blowing bubbles into the breeze. Housing Complex C works less like a locked mystery and more like a shattered one, where the challenge lies in figuring out which broken piece fits where. It doesn't run on the polished gears of Knives Out or Tenet, but rather feels shaped by time limits and the need to trim. Still, the payoff holds when viewed as a whole. Its short runtime makes it perfect for a yearly Halloween watch, and it's an anime that deserves a second and third viewing, maybe even a fourth one too. Junji Ito, Tales of the Macabre / The Collection. When it comes to horror manga, Junji Ito is in a league of his own, which he's destined to rule for ages to come. He doesn't believe in relying on cheap jump scares or tired and tested tropes. Rather, he gets under your skin with horrifyingly unimaginable ideas, twisted logic, and surreal imagery that burns into your brain and seeps into your bones. Since Tomy in 1987, Netflix's Junji Maniac, Japanese Tales of the Macabre was something people were looking forward to when it was released in 2023. The show animated the nightmare world of Japan's most celebrated horror mangaka, but it struggled to hold on to the dread that made the original stories unforgettable. Spread across 12 episodes, the anthology has 20 tales from Ito's unsettling catalog, blending body horror, cosmic madness, and grim parables into bite-sized segments. What Maniac manages well is variety. The series hops across stories that span urban legends, psychological trauma, and supernatural punishment. It opens with the strange Hizikuri siblings, where a photographer finds herself trapped inside a decaying mansion with 6 eccentric siblings and an atmosphere that warps reality. Then comes the mysterious tunnel, a story about memory and loss, where a man returns to the site where his mother vanished, only to discover the tunnel holds far more than grief. Several stories lean into domesticity, but the strange kind. For instance, the ice cream bus plays with childhood trust as a father unknowingly sends his son into the hands of something monstrous. Soichi's 4x4 Walls follows a boy terrorized by his siblings' bizarre antics and growing paranoia inside a room that refuses to stay quiet. The Sandman's Lair is about the descent into sleep paralysis, with a dream desperate to take over the waking body. Heads, might I add, severed ones, can often be seen in hanging balloons flying in the air. The story has a dead pop idol's oversized floating head, which drives copycat suicides across the city. The show also dives into the philosophical. Toontown toys with the idea of sin and retribution, as graves suddenly appear on roads and guilt takes on physical shape. Layers of Terror peels back the skin, quite literally so, on identity, and turns a child's scar into a body horror workshop that questions who we are beneath the surface. Then there's Mole, which explores rot and possession through a decaying apartment. Library Vision pits obsession against domestic normalcy. Unendurable Labyrinth has 2 girls who are taken into a cult hidden in the mountains, where the bully shows how childhood cruelty festers into adult revenge. Even the more playful Soichi's beloved pet takes a 180-degree turn to turn a lovable cat into something truly loathsome. As a whole, Maniac covers the spectrum of Ito's horror, ranging from spiritual decay to flesh-bound nightmares and everything in between. But the transition to animation dilutes a lot of what makes his manga so disturbing. It's almost as if they chose to sacrifice Ito's style for the sake of animation spectacle. The precision of his line work, the stillness of the page, the tension of choosing to turn it, all of that gets flattened into a medium built for motion. Maniac doesn't fail outright, but it rarely captures the creeping dread that Ito delivers with ink and silence. Yet, if you watch it without considering that it's based on Junji Ito's work, we're sure you'll be thrilled. Berserk, 1997 to 98. Berserk, directed by Naohiro Takahashi and adapted from Kentaro Miura's legendary manga, is absolutely a story about sword fights and spilled guts, but it's not just that. The anime is a slow, brutal climb through ambition, betrayal, and grief, and it's all wrapped together through the glue of medieval warfare and demonic horror. Across 25 episodes, the 1997 anime adaptation explores the Golden Age arc while focusing on Guts, a lone mercenary whose fate becomes entangled with the rather charismatic, albeit cold-blooded Griffith, who is also the leader of the Band of the Hawk, a group of mercs. Guts joins the Hawks after besting Griffith in a duel and quickly becomes his most trusted warrior. For a time, their partnership looked unstoppable. Under Griffith's command and Guts' skill with the sword, the Hawks go from hired swords to royal champions and help the Kingdom of Midland end a 100-year-long war. Along the way, Guts grows close to Casca, a fiercely loyal commander in the Hawks who remains devoted to Griffith, though the bond between her and Guts grows stronger over time. But everything changes the day Guts decides to leave. Griffith once said that a true friend must have their own dream, and Guts finally takes that to heart. His decision cuts Griffith deeper than any blade. The loss sends Griffith into a tailspin, and in a moment of desperation, he seduces Princess Charlotte, thinking it will give him leverage, only to be caught and thrown into a dungeon. The Hawks are declared traitors, and Griffith vanishes into chains and silence. A year passes by and Guts returns, stronger and more focused, and finds the Hawks in hiding. They were now leaderless, broken, but still clinging to hope. He and Casca rescue Griffith, though what they find is a ghost of the man he once was. By now, Griffith was mutilated, mute, incapable of holding a sword or even uttering a word. Casca urges Guts to leave, but Griffith overhears, flees, and winds up dragging his broken body into a river. There he finds his Behelit, a mysterious demonic relic. The blood from his wounds activates the relic, and next thing you know, time itself rips open. The world tilts. The eclipse begins, and it's an event that takes everyone from their realm to another. Dragged into a different plane, the Band of the Hawk is surrounded by the God Hand, a pantheon of demonic entities. Griffith is offered power, but only if he sacrifices his comrades, and guess what? He accepts. The Hawks are branded and slaughtered by monstrous apostles. Only Guts and Casca survive, though what happens to them is far from survival. Guts loses an arm and an eye trying to save Casca, who was sexually assaulted by Griffith, now reborn as Femto, and this trauma shatters her mind. When the dust settles, Guts emerges as something else entirely. No longer the soldier who fought for someone else's dream, he becomes the Black Swordsman, a man with no cause except revenge, and no path except the one that leads back to the monsters who destroyed his life. Berserk pulls no punches. The action hits hard, but what really stays is the emotional weight behind it. Loyalty means nothing to fate. Dreams consume the dreamers, and survival doesn't come clean. The show may look like a fantasy war epic, but at its core, it's about how far a man can fall and what gets left behind when the dream dies. Parasite The Maxim, 2014-50. Parasite The Maxim is based on a pretty well-loved manga, but like usually happens, the translation from page to screen doesn't always hold the same weight. The story focuses on Shinichi Izumi, a high schooler whose life changes the night a mysterious parasitic organism fails to invade his brain. Instead, it merges with his right hand. The result is Migi, a sentient being with no emotions and a deeply logical mind which shares Shinichi's body, but with its own will. Together, they form an uneasy alliance. Migi adapts quickly and learns to mimic human behavior enough to avoid detection, but always prioritizes his own survival. Shinichi, on the other hand, finds his sense of identity shaken, which was a pretty obvious thing to happen. As the story moves forward, their bond becomes less about convenience and more about understanding. Other parasites don't live in harmony with humans. When they take over a brain, they lose the host and gain full control of the body, along with a hunger for human flesh. Early attacks leave body parts spread across cities like garbage, but these beings evolve and learn how to hide their killings and blend in. What makes them dangerous isn't just their strength, it's how well they can imitate us without truly grasping what makes us human. That disconnect becomes their greatest weakness. This is where Parasite does wonders. The story isn't about who wins in a fight, it's about what it means to live and whether survival by itself is enough or if you need to thrive. I mean, life is inevitable, but living is a choice. Likewise, Shinichi and Migi both shift over time, and soon Migi begins to care, if only a little, and Shinichi starts to detach. Their conversations about morality, sacrifice, and instinct are the soul of the story. One moment, Migi offers a fake reassurance just to calm Shinichi down. The next, Shinichi finds himself lecturing Migi on the ethics of using people as shields. The anime remains structurally loyal to the manga, and sometimes too loyal. Gore, though never gratuitous in the manga, is central to its theme. The parasites don't kill for fun, unlike humans, and they do what predators do. Sanitizing the violence blunts the point. We're not supposed to be comfortable watching it, and yet the adaptation isn't without merit. Some changes improve the material. For manga readers, the anime feels like a softer version of something sharper. For newcomers, it's a solid entry point into a strange existential world where survival, identity, and empathy all blur together under one skin, and where monsters are never as far removed from us as we'd like to think. As far as longtime fans of Hitoshi Iwaki's original series are concerned, the anime feels faithful in structure but misses something in tone. I mean, we can't place exactly what it is, but yeah. While the show succeeds in several key areas, the adaptation choices and format changes cause a few of the manga's strengths to lose some of their bite. Serial Experiments Lane, 1998. Serial Experiments Lane is one of those shows that asks you questions instead of providing you with answers. It drags you into its circuitry, asks questions about consciousness, and then leaves you high and dry, wondering about life's questions. Set in Tokyo's Setagaya ward, the series follows Lane Iwakura, a soft-spoken, socially withdrawn middle schooler who lives with a family that feels more like furniture than flesh. Her mother barely speaks, her sister ignores her, and her father's affections seem to extend only as far as the motherboard on his desk. Everything changes when Lane receives an email from Chisa Yomoda. The only little hiccup is that Chisa's already dead because she had thrown herself off of a building a few days earlier. But the message claims she's not gone, she had simply moved on. She says she left her body behind and now lives in The Wire, a virtual network that connects every layer of communication. And In The Wired, Chisa says she found God. Soon, Lane's connection to The Wired strengthens. She starts seeing things that others don't. For example, phantom whispers, duplicated selves, and a growing sense that the barrier between the digital and the physical world is starting to decay. Behind all of this is Masami Iri, a former engineer who embedded his consciousness into The Wired through a new protocol and now claims godhood. He sees Lane as the missing piece, the key to merging The Wired with the real world. A hacker group called the Knights of the Eastern Calculus worship Iri and carry out his agenda. Their manipulations turn games like Phantoma into death traps and push people into psychotic breaks. Meanwhile, Takibana General Laboratories, the company that once employed Iri, attempts to contain the damage, but even their motives are murky. Lane drifts between both worlds. She upgrades her computer with a mysterious psyche chip and grows more confident and more connected. Her identity has several different layers. She is as much a quiet schoolgirl as she is a fractured observer. The only thing that feels close to peace is Alice, a classmate who treats her like a person instead of a program. But as The Wired bleeds into daily life, Alice pleads with Lane to choose reality, not simulation. By the end, Lane dismantles it all. He resets reality, erases herself from others' memories, and breaks the link between The Wired and the physical world. The people around her go on, now happier, freer. Even Chisa returns. But Lane stays behind, aware of everyone, present in everything, and yet known by no one. As you can see, Lane isn't about plot. Each episode, called a layer, cuts the story layer by layer to explore thought, identity, and isolation. The show treats hallucination and memory as equally real. It plays with Descartes' "I think, therefore I am," pushing it through a modem. It asks if presence requires a body, if connection requires touch. In the end, Lane sits quietly on the edge of that question, waiting for you to decide what's real. Death Parade TV miniseries 2015. Death Parade opens not with explosions or exposition, but with silence and confusion. Two elevator doors part, and a couple steps into an unfamiliar bar with no memory of how they arrived. The man behind the counter, Deckham, greets them politely. He's dressed like a bartender, but this place isn't interested in drinks. It's a waiting room for the soul, and Deckham is the one who judges who deserves reincarnation and who doesn't. The concept: two people enter, neither remembers how they died. They're told they must play a game, not to win or lose, but to reveal. Every dart throw, every bowling pin knocked down becomes a trigger for memories. Each game unearths truths buried under guilt, jealousy, or fear. In time, the players remember not only their deaths, but what kind of lives they lived and who they were at their worst. These aren't traditional punishments, they're psychological pressure cookers. And once the memories surface, Deckham passes judgment. Each episode follows this structure, with a new pair of strangers arriving at Quindeckham, each bringing a different flavor of tragedy. Some stories lean towards the violent, others the bittersweet. Many of them don't give clear answers, and that's part of the appeal. Death Parade doesn't pretend to know what makes someone worthy of a second chance, it just lays the truth bare and then asks you to sit with it. Visually, the series balances the intimate and the uncanny. Quindeckam's interiors are sleek, glowing, and slightly off, elegant but sterile, like the hotel lobby at the end of the world. The animation captures subtle changes in expression, the twitch of an eye, the tightening of a jaw. Even the bright, bouncy opening theme feels intentionally jarring next to the show's atmosphere, like someone smiling at a funeral. But because of the surface-level structure, the real story unfolds through Deckham himself. He starts off as pure neutrality, robotic, emotionless, unmoved by the lives he observes. That begins to change when Chiyuki enters. She's human and she remembers more than most. Her presence unsettles him. She questions his methods. She empathizes with the dead. And Deckham begins to do the same. The philosophical weight of the show comes through in moments, not monologues. What does it mean to be good? Do intentions matter more than results? Can you forgive someone without excusing what they've done? Death Parade doesn't hand out conclusions. It lets viewers draw their own or sit with the discomfort of not having one at all. That said, the series isn't without its limitations. Its 12-episode run moves quickly. Some characters and arcs could have used more time, and for viewers less invested in spiritual framing, the show's focus on judgment and the afterlife might feel unnecessarily abstract, but even then, it lands, and it sticks. Neon Genesis Evangelion, 1995 to 96. Neon Genesis Evangelion doesn't end the way most viewers expect. After 24 episodes of escalating conflict, character trauma, and existential dread, punctuated by battles between biomechanical titans and biblical monsters, the series doesn't close with a bang. Instead, it turns inward. This is almost 2 decades old, so we'll sort of focus on how awesome the ending was. Episodes 25 and 26 abandon the physical world entirely and pull us into the mind of Shinji Ikari, where the real war unfolds, not against angels or his father, but against himself. Episode 24 ends with the death of Kaworu, the final angel. Shinji kills him, not because he wants to, but because Kaworu asks him to. That leaves Shinji devastated. The one person who seemed to accept him unconditionally turns out to be his enemy, and yet still shows him kindness. The lines between love and betrayal blur, and Shinji spirals. Episode 25 opens in a void. No cities, no mechas, no nerve, just a boy in a chair, asking himself why he exists. This is the start of instrumentality, a process initiated by Zila to unify all human souls into one collective being, erasing individuality in the name of perfect understanding. Gendo Ikari, Shinji's father, supports the process for his own reasons. He believes it will allow him to reunite with his deceased wife, Yui, but for Shinji, the experience becomes a psychological reckoning. The audience sees instrumentality not through cataclysm or cosmic spectacle, but through Shinji's disintegrating psyche. The structure breaks. Characters appear out of nowhere. Scenery shifts from bedrooms to voids to school hallways. Friends and foes alike confront him, not with fists, but with words. They pick apart his need for validation, his fear of rejection, his belief that he's worthless unless others need him. Shinji begins to understand that he's shaped by others' perceptions, but he also has the power to define himself. A moment in episode 26 pushes this realization forward. He finds himself in a lighthearted alternate world where Asuka is a childhood friend, Rei is a clumsy transfer student, and everything plays like a slice-of-life comedy. It's not meant to trick him, but to show that things could be different. The reality isn't fixed. Eventually, Shinji rejects the fantasy. He admits that a world without pain is tempting, but also hollow. That individuality, for all its heartache, allows people to connect in a real way. In the final moments, the stage falls away. Shinji stands on a coral reef surrounded by the people who mattered to him. They congratulate him, not because he won a battle, but because he chose to live, exist as himself. Claymore, 2007. Claymore doesn't get talked about much anymore, but it should. Released in 2007 by Madhouse and based on Norihiro Yagi's long-running manga, Claymore is a dark fantasy anime that tells a spine-chilling and disturbing story about vengeance, identity, and the cost of power. While it might not have the polish of newer titles or the promotional muscle of franchise-heavy giants, its driven and quietly tragic story does the trick. The world of Claymore is nothing like Hugs and Rainbows. Here, humans live in constant fear of Yoma, who are basically shape-shifting predators that come to towns disguised as ordinary people but feed on flesh while hiding behind familiar faces. In response to this mayhem, a mysterious group known only as the Organization creates human Yoma hybrids to hunt them down. These warriors, who always happen to be females, are feared as much as they are needed. Each one has a massive blade, silver eyes, and a monstrous secret. When they draw too heavily on their inner Yoma energy, called Yoki, they risk transforming into the very monsters they fight. So there's a pretty big risk when it comes to working with them. These corrupted warriors are known as awakened beings, and once the change begins, there's no going back. The anime follows Claire, a low-ranked Claymore with her own reasons for taking up the sword. In the first episode, she saves a boy named Reiki from a Yoma who had replaced his brother. Cast out of his village, Reiki chooses to follow Claire, and the two of them form a fragile bond. Through him, we learn the truth of what it means to live as a Claymore. Despite the premise, Claymore isn't only about slicing monsters in half, and it has more to it than meets the eye. It's a story about women caught in a machine designed to chew them up. The anime handles its all-female cast with nuance and never reduces them to tropes or fan service. Relationships are grounded in loyalty, pain, and mutual understanding. The emotional core, especially between Claire and Reiki, avoids melodrama while also doing justice to their fear of losing one another. Visually, the series leans into a cold, washed-out palette that suits its tone. Towns feel abandoned even when filled with people. Forests are quiet but never peaceful. The Yoma designs are distinct, alien, off-kilter, and increasingly grotesque as the show dives into awakened beings. The action holds up, though some animation shortcuts are hard to ignore today. If you've only seen post-2015 animation, Claymore might take a moment to adjust to, but its fights still carry weight, especially once you know what's at stake for the warriors involved. The biggest flaw, however, seems to be its length. The anime covers the first 11 volumes of the manga and invents a rushed ending in the final episodes. Maiden Abyss, 2017. Maiden Abyss may initially seem like a standard fantasy tale, complete with wide-eyed kids, strange creatures, and a mysterious world, but that impression is deceiving. Behind its soft colors and almost childlike character design is one of the cruelest and most carefully constructed dark fantasies in modern anime. Instead of depending on isekai tropes, it gives us a world where depth is both literal and existential, where the further you descend, the the more the world peels itself open, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The Abyss itself is treated as a character. It's a massive pit located at the edge of the city of Orth and extends through multiple layers of unknown terrain. As you go deeper, each layer grows more hostile, both in terms of the creatures it houses and the consequences of trying to return. As a diver descends, the Abyss exerts its quote-unquote curse on the diver. It's basically a force that causes physical and mental degradation when one tries to ascend. The deeper you go, the more brutal the symptoms. At the lowest layers, returning is equivalent to suicide. Riko, the daughter of the legendary White Whistle, Liza the Annihilator, dreams of reaching the bottom. She's a Red Whistle, barely more than a beginner, but her curiosity and desire to follow her mother's path push her to leave the safety of the surface. She finds her opportunity in Reg, a humanoid robot with no memory, discovered near the Abyss's edge. His mechanical body and retractable arms suggest he came from far below, which only strengthens Riko's conviction. Together, they descend. The show constantly frames downward movement on both progress and sacrifice. Everything about Riko's journey bends towards descent. Even the camera angles, especially early on, emphasize this. The world above fades. What lies below becomes the only thing that matters, and unlike most fantasy worlds, light doesn't equal safety here. In Maiden Abyss, light reveals threats, beasts, relics, watchers. The deeper layers are bathed in ambient glow, an eerie effect generated by the Abyss itself, not the sun. Darkness offers silence. Light brings teeth. The show's artistry lies in its restraint. It hints, it builds slowly. When horror hits, it hits hard because it's earned. Pain feels permanent. Choices come with a cost. Even its most beautiful scenes are laced with tension. Every descent strips something away. Safety, certainty, humanity. Maiden Abyss is a rare fantasy story that understands wonder and horror aren't opposites, they feed each other, and that's what makes it unforgettable. Man Crybaby miniseries 2018. Man Crybaby picks you up as a happy-go-lucky viewer wanting to watch a horror anime, then throws you into a world that's unflinchingly honest about what people become when fear, desire, and power strip them bare. So you don't really get any time to ease into anything. Adapted from Go Nagai's classic 1970s manga, this 10-episode Netflix series directed by Masaaki Yuasa reimagines the original's Hellfire themes for a modern audience. Needless to say, as a newer show, it has an updated setting, better visuals, and the story goes into slightly darker, more personal territory than the source material. The premise is deceptively simple. Demons exist, they've always existed, but humans have forgotten. That changes when Ryo Asuka, a mysterious and sharp-tongued teen, reunites with his childhood friend, Akira Fudo, and reveals that a demonic resurrection is coming. To fight back, Ryo uses Akira as a test subject and forces him to merge with a demon. But instead of losing his humanity, Akira retains it and becomes a devil man, a creature with the strength of a demon and the soul of a human. From there, the series starts to explore what separates a man from a monster, which is the central theme of the story. In Man Crybaby, the most hateful and vile acts are often committed by humans, and the most human moments sometimes come from demons. The real threat isn't some horned beast from the deep, it's the mob, the fear, the judgment, and the desperate need to blame someone when the world no longer makes sense. Visually, the series is a fever dream. Yuasa's animation bends anatomy, distorts motion, and plays with color like an oil spill on fire. At times, it feels surreal and messy, but never without intention. Sensuality, violence, and transformation are inseparable here. It's not just aesthetics, though. Man Crybaby hits a home run because it doesn't get scared while exploring loneliness, guilt, betrayal, and love with the kind of weight that lingers. Its portrayal of queer characters is rare in anime, but thankfully, that's not reduced to stereotypes or subtext, but treated with empathy. Miki and Miko's relationship carries a strange tension that evolves into something honest and affirming. The only flaw is probably its short length. 10 episodes simply isn't enough for everything it tries to do. Some demons get little more than a cameo. Some arcs end before they settle in, but we definitely recommend it because what matters, and strangely so, is the ache it leaves behind. The Promised Neverland, 2019 to 2020. On the surface, Grace Fieldhouse seems like the perfect orphanage. Children laugh, eat well, play freely, and love their caretaker, a woman they call mom. But this isn't a fairy tale, and the reality is that this is just a system designed to raise children like livestock. In this world, demons exist, and to maintain their intelligence and form, they must eat humans. To prevent war, humans and demons agreed to separate their worlds. In the demon world, quote-unquote farms breed children for slaughter and are run by caretakers in establishments that are made to look like homes. If that doesn't make you tremble in your guts, or at least make you uncomfortable, something might be wrong with you. Anyways, The Promised Neverland starts in 2045, nearly a millennium after the original pact known as The Promise was made. Emma, Norman, and Ray are the oldest and brightest kids in the Gracefield house. They excel at the routine exams, lead the younger children, and trust their caretaker, Isabella. That trust dies a painful death when one night, Emma and Norman follow a girl named Connie. What they find is her corpse. From that moment on, it becomes clear that Gracefield isn't a home, but a slaughterhouse. Emma and Norman begin plotting an escape, and Ray joins them. Together, they train the other children, map out the terrain, and slowly figure out Isabella's defenses. But their plan hits a road bump when Norman is shipped out. In his absence, Emma and Ray lead the remaining children and successfully flee the farm, though not without cost. The younger kids are left behind, and the world outside proves just as dangerous. From that point, it's no longer about escaping a cage, it's about surviving a wasteland. Demons roam freely. Some are hostile, others, like Mujika and Sonju, offer help. Mujika becomes an important character, a demon who doesn't need to eat humans to survive. She and Sonju challenge the idea that all demons are monsters or evil, just as Akira did in Man Crybaby. They complicate the conflict and offer Emma another way forward, one that sounds somewhat similar to coexistence. Eventually, the children reunite with Norman, who is changed. He now leads a faction bent on genocide. No more demons, no more threat. Emma disagrees because she wants peace, not revenge. The finale is a battle between Emma's hope against Norman's trauma and the pragmatism of Peter Rattray, the human face of the farm system. Emma wins, but at a price. She rewrites the so-called promise, sets the children free, and leaves her memories behind to make it happen. Cloverworks brought this world to life with great skill and efficiency. The animation isn't always polished, but the direction often compensates for that. Clever use of 3D backgrounds and experimental camera work, the rotating shots, POV sequences, and pendulum swings, they all come together to make something larger than itself.